Alright, in this chapter we're also going to be talking about complementary and supplementary angles. What I would like for you to remember is if I see this symbol in here that is 90 degrees, and we've discussed that straight line is 180 degrees because it's a half of a circle. Now, and here it's just a quarter of a circle, right? Now, you will hear the words complementary and supplementary angles. What I want you to know is, have you ever heard the saying, complement is the right thing to do? That means right angle is complementary. Right angle is this one right here. So if you have to identify what kind of angle is what, this in here is a complementary because it's giving me 90 degrees. And the other one obviously then has to be supplementary. And as we said, complementary angles are 90 degrees. So in here, this is 90 degrees. And I'm sure you see that there is two angles, right? That are adjacent. I have one angle in here. That angle is x minus 8. I have another angle, which is this one in here, and that angle there is 20 degrees. And I know that if I add these two angles up, I'm supposed to get 90 degrees. That's the sum of those two angles. That's the total of them. So let's add them up and find what x is equal to. So the first angle in here is x minus 8. And I know that if I add it to this angle that is 20 degrees, the sum of those two is going to be equal to 90-degree angle because they're giving me 90 degrees. This one and that one, the sum of them is 90. Now knowing that, I can solve easily for x. So I have the x, and on the left side of the equal sign, there's a couple things I can combine. Negative 8 plus 20. If I add that, negative 8 plus 20, that will give me positive 12. And I still have the equal sign, and it equals to 90. To solve for the x, I'm isolating my x, my variable. I have to get everything away from the x, right? So the 12 wants to go to the other side of the equal sign. It's going from left to the right. To get rid of the plus 12, I have to do the opposite of what it's doing. So to make this 0, to make it to be gone, positive 12, how do I get rid of positive 12? I have to subtract it, right? Inverse operation of addition is subtraction. Or you can look at it this way. When I'm switching sides, when I go from left to right or from right to left, I'm switching sides, I have to switch the sign. So opposite of plus is minus. So I have to subtract 12. And I have to subtract 12 from both sides of the equal sign because it is an equation and I have to keep it in balance. I have to keep it equal. I did not touch the x. X is still in there. 12 minus 12, that gave me 0, and that's exactly what I wanted. I still have equals. 90 minus 12 is 78. So x equals 78. Now let's make sure that we are correct. In this angle in here, it's angle x minus 8. Everywhere I see x, I will substitute it in with a 78. So let's do that. X minus 8, so 78 is my x, minus 8, that equals 70, and this angle in here is 20. If I add those two angles up, I should get complementary. They're supposed to give me 90 degrees. 70 plus 20 is 90. So yes, I was correct, x equals 78. Let's look at problem number 4. We already figured out that it is a supplementary angle. It's given me a straight line, and straight line is 180 degrees. That means if I add those two angles up in there, this angle with the red angle, if I add them up, the sum of them, they're giving me 180 degrees, a straight line. So to find x means add them up and make it equal to 180 degrees. Let's do that. This angle in here is already given, nice angle, I like it, which is 76. So this angle in here plus this angle over there, that angle is 2x plus 4. The sum of these two angles is supposed to give me 180 degrees, which is a straight line. Let's look at the left side of the equal sign. Is there anything I can combine? I sure can, right? I can combine the 76 with the positive 4. So let's do that. Let's clean up. 76 plus 4 is 80. I still have that positive 2x, so 80 plus 2x. I still have the equal 180 degrees. My next step is isolate my variable. So I'm going to put the x in a bubble. And if you remember equations, we've talked about that multiplication and division is the last thing I will undo. So I will not get rid of that 2 yet because the 2 is multiplying the x. That's a multiplication. That means get rid of the 80. Combine these two. The 80 is positive, and I want the positive 80 to be gone from the left side, right? So it's gonna become negative 80 because 80 minus 80 will give me 0. Or you can look at it this way. If I'm switching sides, I have to switch the sign. 80 is positive, opposite of positive 80 is negative 80, right? And we've talked about it. What do I do on one side of the equal sign? I have to do to the other side of the equal sign. So subtract 80 from both sides. 80 minus 80 is a 0. I still have 2x. I still have the equal sign, and it equals 100. And my final step is get rid of the 2 that is attached to the x with the multiplication. Opposite of multiply, right? The inverse operation of multiplication is division. And remember, I use fractions for division. I divide here, I divide over here. Keep it in balance. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I am left with 1x equals 100 divided by 2 is 50. So x equals 50. Let's make sure that we are correct. Everywhere I see x, I'm going to substitute in the 50. This angle in here is 76. 76 plus this angle in here. Well, 2 times x, I mean that it means 2 times 50, that is 100, plus 4 is 104. If I add those two up, 76 plus 104, indeed it will give me 180 degrees, and I am correct. Now let's keep on going because chapter 3.1 is kind of extensive. So let's look at a couple things in here. This chapter talks about parallel lines and transversals. In parallel lines, we also talk about corresponding angles when they're cut by a transversal. What does it mean? If you look at these lines, line P and line Q, they're like twin sisters or twin brothers. They're the same line. That means if I was to take line Q and put it on top of line P, you will notice that this angle, this red angle, is actually this angle, right? They're identical if you just lift this line and put it on top of it. If you do not see it, I want you to think about it this way. This red angle is on top of the line and it lies to the right. So if this angle in here, which is on top right, was 50 degrees, on this line, this angle is also top right, correct? Or if you lift this, place it on top, you will see they lay at the same spot. If these are parallel lines cut by a transversal, they're identical. That means the angles will be identical. So if this one is 50 top right, this one is also 50. And now I can figure out all of the rest of the angles. We've talked about vertical angles. We said vertical angles that create those little butterflies, right? They're like those two wings. So those angles also gonna be congruent. That means they're the same angle. So if this was 50, they're touching at the point. The one vertical to it, it's a vertical angle, also will be 50. If this one is 50, bottom left, or lift this, put it on top of here, or you know it's a vertical angle, this one will be also 50 degrees. Now, what else do we know? We know that straight line, this is a straight line, is 180 degrees. That means from here all the way to there is 180 degrees. Now the question is, well, if this part in here, the red angle, if the red angle in here is 50 degrees, what is that left over? What is that part in here? What is that, let's say the blue angle? What is this part? So we already know, as we've talked about it, straight line is 180 degrees. From here to there, that's 180. I know that some of these two angles, those two angles will give me a total of 180. I know 50 of the 180. What is the leftover? There's a couple ways to look at it. I'm gonna name this angle X. That's my unknown. I know that if I add the X to the 50, I should get 180. So the equation will say X plus 50 equals 180. To solve for X, you have to subtract 50 from both sides. Drop the X down. This is a 0. X equals 130 degrees. So if X was 130, this one is 50, 130 plus 50 will give me some of those two angles, which is 180 degrees indeed, and yes, I am correct. I have noticed that some of my students have a hard time seeing this, so let's look at it another way. Imagine that you have a pocket, and you know that that is 50 degrees. So imagine this is the 50, right? We've talked about this set. So imagine that this was the pocket in your pants. And you have $180 in your pocket. And then somebody's gonna come and they will say, hey, can I borrow 50 bucks? So they will take $50 out of your pocket. How much money are you gonna be left with? Everybody will know this at this point, $130. Because you had 180 to start with. Alright? So now that we know that this angle in here is 130, vertical angle to it is 130, right? Corresponding angles. This angle is top of the line, left. Top left is in here. That's 130. Vertical angle to it is also 130. You will see that these problems will only have, really at this point, two numbers. The one is always going to be given. You will be started out with one number. So they have to. The problem has to give you a number. So if they do give you, let's say, 60 in here, you can solve everything else. You're going to know there's going to be 4 60s, which is going to be vertical angles, top right, vertical is 60, and then 180, straight line. Somebody takes 60 out, you're gonna be left with 120, right? Because this is supposed to give me 180, 60 plus 120 is 180. This is gonna be 120, this is 120, this is 120. Sounds good?